For the last 3 years, I've done a thing on this channel called Thanksgaming, which is basically just telling a story about how games have had some sort of positive impact on my life, with how ridiculous and scary the world can be sometimes, and with how negative the conversation surrounding games can be a lot of the time. Sometimes it's just nice to step back and remind ourselves why we like these things in the first place. It's a tradition that I've grown very fond of, and this year I wanted to talk about one of the most important series to me. Something that's kind of bizarre about me is that if you know me at all, if you watch my content, or if you know me in person, you know that I care about Zelda quite a bit. I have a shelf of just Zelda memorabilia, and it's clearly the series that means the most to me. Yet I've rarely talked about it on this channel. I think the main reason is that for Thanksgaming I tend to gravitate towards looking for games that have had like a very powerful, significant impact on a certain aspect of my life, like Final Fantasy VII did with my approach to storytelling, or the way that Earthbound played a specific role in my life that specific year. But with Zelda, there hasn't really been any big singular moment that has meant so much to me. Zelda has really been more of a constant in my life than anything, and I think that's why I want to talk about it so much. Growing up, I'd play games with my parents a lot, meaning they would play and I would watch because I was too young to really understand what was going on. I was always enchanted with these games, even before I could really entirely grasp them, and I think it was just the pure imagination behind them. One of the games that I have the most vivid memories of, well, I should say, plural games, are specifically the Zelda games that I would play with my mom sometimes. I remember watching her play the original two on the NES. I remember watching her play Link to the Past and playing a little bit of it myself. And I remember playing Ocarina of Time, and then whenever I got to the scary part, where you have to go into the well, I would have to have her play it for me. Now that I'm older, I promise I'm capable of playing all the way through every Zelda game by myself, without wetting myself. But back then, I could not. And then, as happens with a lot of kids, as they get older, my relationship with my parents deteriorated as I was a teenager, which I'm sure isn't entirely uncommon. There were a lot of reasons behind it, and I was a pretty quiet, reserved kid in general who didn't really open up to people all that much. And it's really only after I went out on my own and came out to New York and started making my own life that I started working on building real relationships. I've been getting closer with my mom again over the last several years, and some of the first conversations that we had was just talking about Zelda and talking about how when we were young, or when I was young, she wasn't that young. She was younger. She was young, but she had those same memories of playing the Zelda games with me when I was a kid, and that was a huge bonding point for us. And that helped open things up and have more conversations that mattered and actually form a relationship that is healthy. And outside of that, when I was growing up, the Zelda games were still a constant for me. You know, I played a lot of games pretty much my entire life, but each Zelda game coming out was an event for me. I have specific memories of being excited for each release, whether it was on a console or a handheld, and it was what I talked to my friends about. It was how I made friends. Was through sharing these games, because I didn't know how else to approach people. Come into a town that we had just moved into and engage with people other than through these games. That was the only thing I could think of, which may have been a problem on my part, but it was a shared interest. Most specifically, there was a Zelda fan site called the Desert Colossus. But back in 2006, they were having a caption contest, where the prize was a free copy of Twilight Princess, the Zelda game coming out later that year. I really wanted that game, but of course money was tight, and so I was like, sure, I'll try and win this contest. and I won it, and they sent me that copy, and I hung around on the site, and I got to know the people there. I talked on the forums, and it was a very small community, which just meant that we actually got sort of tight-knit. And there was this offshoot to it called Hyrule Adventures 2, and it was essentially taking the base idea behind D&D, or just tabletop gaming, and putting it in the land of Hyrule, and having a huge navigational map. And that was where I started writing fiction for the first time, where we were in this familiar world that we all knew because we all had a love for this game, this series, these fantastical locations and characters that captured our imaginations, and it was a sandbox for us to play in and flex our own creativity and learn how to write interesting stories, and have people to bounce these ideas off of and learn what worked with an audience and what didn't. It was an incredible process to be a part of. And from there, I then started writing my own fiction novels. They're all terrible. I tried to read through one of them again recently, and it was bad. It's really, really bad. But in my defense, I was like 14, and that's when I started realizing that I liked to tell stories, and it turned into writing plays for children's theater, and then later turned into writing screenplays and these YouTube videos. And wanting to tell stories to people came about because of that environment that I was in because of The Legend of Zelda. Every entry in that series has helped me identify certain parts of my life because of just the time they came out or whatever. Even up to its most recent release, Breath of the Wild, I have put 150 hours into so far this year, and I'm still playing it on the subway. There are times when I appreciate a game like Last of Us or Life is Strange for telling like a serious dramatic story and making me think about complex themes. And then there are times where I just want to be swept away in a fantasy, and I just want to be enveloped in this insanely creative world and with these incredible characters. And I kept myself as uninformed and blind as possible, so I wouldn't know what was in Breath of the Wild before it came out. And when I got it, that first night, running out into that world and seeing everything, this wide open shot of how large Hyrule was and everything that was there and how beautiful it was, and just this sense of exploration and this sense of wonder. It was just such an incredible place to retreat to, and to feel that rush of feelings and then just go, God, I want to make somebody feel this way. Like, I want to create something that makes somebody just take a step back and breathe it in and just look around and wonder. I want to make these things. For me, Zelda has just been an incredible source of inspiration and just a huge example of, hey, just go big and tell your story and commit to your world and your characters and just make something magical, and people will go along with it. And it'll mean so much to those people. That childlike wonder, I think, is just an important thing for us to keep in our lives so we don't just become miserable all the time with how depressing so much of life can be. And no matter what else happens in my life and what other games come and go and have an impact on me, I genuinely feel like my entire life, Zelda is always going to constantly be there. And I don't think I could be more thankful for that. Thanks for listening, guys, and if you have anything positive to share, whether about Zelda or just something else this year, please talk about it. We could definitely use that positivity right now.